Hello again, and welcome to the Temple Institute Parsha class. My name is Gedalia Meyer, and I'm podcasting from Ma'ale Adumim in Israel. This week, we're about 1 week into the Hebrew month that's called Elul, which is technically the last month of the Hebrew calendar. I say technically because this is the calendar that's been in use for about 2,000 years, but in biblical times, it was the 6th month for certain technical reasons. Elul is an important month for many people in the Jewish world, even though it has no real significant days that actually come in it. The reason it's significant is because it is the month immediately preceding the Jewish holiday of Rosh Hashanah, which means the New Year, which of course is an extremely significant day in the Jewish year. And right after that, 10 days after that, is the day of Yom Kippur, which is considered the holiest day of the year. Rosh Hashanah, of course, ushers in the new year. That's what the name means. Yom Kippur is the Day of Atonement, a 24-hour fast that serves as kind of an annual personal and communal reckoning of moral and spiritual conduct. For many Jews, these days are the high points of their Jewish year. And for many other Jews, it's actually the only days that they show up in a synagogue. So these are pretty significant days. And in this particular year, something unusual is happening. All over the world, in many parts of the world where Jews are, it's not clear if the synagogues will be open on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. As far as I know, in many communities, they still do not know. It's only a few weeks away. They still do not know if the synagogues will be open. And this is a very important thing because most synagogues in the world have never been closed for a Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur. And this could be the first year in perhaps decades or even more than a century that the synagogues will not be open. And for those for whom this is the only day of the year they actually show up, this means they won't show up in a synagogue in the course of the whole year. So this is a pretty big and unusual year in that regard. It's all because of this pandemic. The pandemic has made it in a certain way to some people that even though Rosh Hashanah is 3 weeks away, it seems like it's somewhere off in the distant future, or perhaps even in another lifetime, that how could we go back to the normal like that? But the pandemic has put into our lives a certain amount of insecurity and uncertainty where we really don't know what's in store in the future, tomorrow, next week, 3 weeks from now, next year. We really don't know these things. It's a tremendous amount of upheaval has taken place over much of the past year, and we really don't know what to expect. Many of us hope and maybe expect that things are going to go back to normal pretty soon, and we'll forget about this whole episode as if it was one sort of bad dream or something like that. And other people are pretty doubtful about that and think maybe we're onto something permanent here, and who knows what's really going to happen. We long for the stability of the past and the expected predictability of the future. But we dread the possibility that all that may be gone and the future is as unknown to us as perhaps the afterlife. The calendar, however, is one of those dependables in life in certain order. It's like an anchor for the Jews and for everybody to some degree. Through the centuries, it has served this function for the Jews, that it just kind of anchors us to a dependable time, almost like a metronome that is regularly beating out the minutes and the days and the months and the years. This was not the only anchor and metronome that the Jews have had. They also had the Torah, around which the calendar itself was based, and the numerous commandments. They gave the Jews, for centuries, for millennia, they gave the Jews a purpose in an otherwise haphazard world. Let's get on to the Parsha. The Parsha is called Ki Teitzei, which is a sort of nondescript name. It means when you go. And this leads on to the next paragraph in the Parsha that has nothing to do with when you go. It's just a lead on, the introduction into the next paragraph. It happens to be that this particular Parsha is loaded with commandments. There are actually, according to the standard count, there are 74 commandments, which is approximately 1/8 of the total number of commandments in the Torah itself. This is a lot for a single Parsha. There are other Parshas like this, but there's only a couple that are like this, that have this many mitzvahs. It's basically one commandment following another, sometimes only one verse long, sometimes a few verses long, but it's just one after another. in a seemingly random order. When one reads through Ki Teitzei, this parsha, one gets the feeling that it's really nothing more than a general list of commandments that were sort of slapped together to kind of wrap things up for this section of the book of Deuteronomy. It is not easy to detect any sense of sequence, though everyone suspects that there must be some sort of order there. The topics vary considerably in this parsha. There's no common theme to be found. They switch from details about wars to inheritance, to divorce, to agriculture, to dealing with birds' nests. There's a relatively long section dealing with various situations of rape and adultery. There are a few things about wages and loans, charity, honest dealings in commerce. Good luck finding any connection between all of this, let alone a reason for this sequence. But the ancient rabbis, they managed to find a common theme many centuries ago, perhaps as much as 2,000 years ago. They've managed to find a string that kind of ties everything together, at least some of those commandments. They came up with a rule about these commandments that gives both a progression of sorts and tells us something even more important about the purpose of what frequently seems to be commandments without any clear reason. They actually draw two examples from our parsha to demonstrate this sort of sequence or order. The first deals with the opening series of commandments that deal with problematic situations, such as handling of war captives, a hated wife, a rebellious son, and an executed criminal, which seem to have nothing to do with each other. The thread that they drew that connects all these things is a rabbinic statement. The Hebrew statement goes, Avera goreret avera. We're not going to go into all the gory details of those commandments, but this is the theme. Avera goreret avera means that a transgression drags in another transgression. One produces another. When one gets into that mode of transgression, what's going to follow somehow or another is another transgression. You just get into a roll of transgressions. That's what Avera goreret avera actually means. Now, it's unclear if this was meant to be understood as some sort of weird spiritual effect that God is imposing on people. You do one, God's going to force you to do another, or something like that, sort of like a Jewish version of karma, or if it's simply some sort of psychological consequence of behavior. The first idea is a classic example of divine intervention resulting from and generating a pattern in our actions. The second explanation really sort of explains what that divine interaction is, that it's nothing more than our own minds getting accustomed to certain spiritual patterns, even though they are morally destructive. Now, it happens to be, thankfully, that this idea of finding behavioral patterns in the commandments works in the positive sense also. Later on in the parsha, there's another such seemingly random series. It goes from a strange commandment of driving away a mother bird from its nest before taking the eggs, to building a house with a railing around the roof to prevent people from falling, to mixing different species of seeds in a vineyard, or not mixing different species of seeds in a vineyard, to not plowing with an ox and a donkey together, to not wearing garments made of mixed materials sewn together, to wearing ritual strings on the corners of garments. Admittedly, there is no apparent pattern in this series. Not only is there no apparent pattern in this series, but some of the individual commandments themselves show little to no rational purpose. But those same rabbis have found a thread that connects all of these things together. And what is that thing? It sort of parallels the other one that we saw. Instead of avera goreret avera, transgression pulls another transgression, it's mitzvah goreret mitzvah. A commandment causes another commandment. This seemingly haphazard string of commandments that we just examined may not have any obvious order to it, but it does have a more subtle order that could be applied perhaps to any sequence of such commandments. The fundamental rule here is that one mitzvah causes another. Again, the same thing. It's not really clear is that this is some sort of mysterious workings of a Jewish form of karma, or if it is simply a psychological effect that a certain good mode of behavior causes more good modes of behavior. Either way, we have this idea that in some way we generate our own spiritual destiny, at least to a limited degree. Now, let's take a little journey down Jewish history. In Jewish history, there was a kind of constant throughout the ages. There was the single constant in Jewish life was that nothing was really certain. No matter where Jews lived all over the world, the one thing they could depend on is that there was nothing they could really depend on. They never knew what was coming next, whether it was a pogrom or a plague or a famine or a war or who knows what was going to happen. They never knew what was coming. Outside influence could wreak havoc on a Jewish community anywhere and at any time. Contrasting this was the certainty that came with this internal guide the Jews always had. These rules, these mitzvot, these commandments that they had to do, they determined much of individual and communal life. And that was the dependable certainty, the single dependable certainty that Jews had in their lives. Having this regiment of rules to guide personal conduct and social culture was a matter of absolute necessity for the Jews. Without it, they were subject to the whims and fancies of the outside world. With it, they had a compass to steer them around the storms of life and to anchor them, to keep them from drifting too far off course. Now, there's a famous historical question concerning the Jews. It's one of the deepest questions concerning Jewish history, and it's actually a deep question concerning human history. The question is, how did the Jews survive? 2,000 years, 3,000 years, whatever it's been, all over the place, in all kinds of situations all over the world. Why wasn't it that the Jews simply just vanished, just faded away into history and just like so many others, hundreds, perhaps thousands of other cultures, just vanished? Why didn't the Jews do that? It's a very famous question, and there's no real concrete answers to this question. They could have, it's a million chances in a million different areas to just sort of fade into whatever larger community they were living within. They could have become Christians or Muslims or who knows what religion, or just no religion whatsoever, just forgotten their Judaism, but they didn't. How is this so? It's quite uncanny in human history. There's probably no case in all of the world that quite matches the Jews in terms of longevity and in terms of widespread different cultures all over the world, and the Jews always managed to stick it out. What is the reason for this? So it happens to be that there have been several answers that have been used to answer this question. They might work, they might not work, but perhaps the simplest one of all is this thing right here, that these mitzvot, these commandments, these rules, even if they made no sense whatsoever, the Jews knew this is what we have to do to live a Jewish life. This is really the answer to that question. What made the Jews survive? It was having these rules and having this way of life, which shaped their culture and blended them into a people that simply did not want to die out and would not let themselves die out. It was the commandments themselves and the thread that they tied the Jewish people together with that enabled the staying power of the Jewish people. So getting back to those patterns that the rabbis found in this random series of commandments, we can see how this may have come about, how these commandments may have kept the Jews together. The doing of a mitzvah, or its converse, is a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy. If either route is taken once, it will lead a person, however subtly, to go down that route again. Well, this may strike us as the most natural thing, since we see this in all kinds of human behavior. In its Jewish context, it takes on a completely different form. It is not just a regular routine or a habitual form of behavior that is on display here. Although there's no question about it that this is partially what's going on here. But it is also evidence of a spiritual power of sorts, either internal or external, that enters into the soul of a person or a community and steers them towards a specific course. In a sense, it is like taking fate into one's own hands and using that power to draw order and purpose into life. Now, this is all very nice and good, and it perhaps may even makes a certain amount of sense, but much of this is extremely outdated, it's outlandish to the modern mind. Who needs these antiquated rules that really make no sense, that force us into a mode of behavior that we don't necessarily need or even want? Most of us believe that we can really call our own shots in life, and we can decide what we really want to do without some ancient book of rules that has little or no apparent relevance to modern life. While there is a certain logic to this argument, there is a counter argument that this is precisely what we need to do. Uncertainty lingers right outside our doors and right within our doors. Even in the best of times, we face the ever-growing sense that our lives have no real purpose whatsoever, and that any purpose we do manage to scrounge up is contrived and temporary. Perhaps it is only with some system like this, whether ancient or of more recent vintage, that we will find that elusive sense of purpose and that anchor that gives us an amount of certainty in our lives. As the days of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur steadily creep up on us, we are reminded that in this steadily changing and uncertain world we live in, some things are as dependable as the falling of the leaves. As much as we hate to admit it, we very possibly do need those anchors in our lives, if only to let us know that we are human and we need things. For observant Jews, this is the time to take stock of life and to examine where we are heading. Which course are we on, if any? What is our purpose in life? Shabbat Shalom.